Yes. I suppose you can rest for a bit, Brittany. Cinderella, would you spar with me? Relieved that he'd come to that conclusion, I sprawled out on the mats to give my aching muscles a break. Oh wait, they were going to spar. I started to get back up, but then noticed that Alexander shrugged off his shirt and moved off the mats to the middle of the big room. Cinderella wore stern black pants that didn't appear suited for sparring, but he shrugged out of his jacket and unbuttoned his shirt to take that off too. Very well, my lord. Cinderella's bared chest was so scarred that I could only stare at it in shock. On the front, lighter and darker lines crisscrossed the skin, but someone had taken the time to carefully tattoo his body with lines and dots that flowed with the scars. It made it look like a beautiful pattern instead of something gruesome. His back was scarred in much the same way, but there it was much worse. There were more scars than unmarked skin. It almost looked as if someone had whipped him, day after day after day. He hadn't bothered to hide the scars with a tattoo here. Cinderella moved almost as fluidly as Alexander did, like a cobra. The two of them slowly started circling each other, moving clockwise first, and then switching to counterclockwise. Cinderella darted forward suddenly, enhancing my image of a cobra, and then they were sparring with each other. Really sparring. The play fight made my throat go dry and my heartbeat speed up. They moved so incredibly fast and fluidly that most of their movements were blurred to my eyes. It looked like a dance the way they spun around each other, aiming high kicks and low punches and everything in between. There was flips and backflips and other kinds of acrobatics mixed in between that would make any real acrobat seriously jealous. Really, they could move like no one I'd ever seen before. I also realized that Alexander had been holding back on me that short moment we sparred. I thought he'd been fast, but I would never even have the chance to avoid him when he moved like he did now. I couldn't tell who had the upper hand in the fight. As far as I could tell, they each kept blocking each other's punches and kicks, until I noticed the trickle of blood that tinged Cinderella's upper lip red. Once I saw that I could pick up more marks, a gash over his shoulder, thin and narrow and hardly noticeable amongst his scars. The way he was favoring his left leg for kicking more now than before, Alexander didn't appear to have a mark anywhere on his body though. I heard more than saw it when Alexander's kick landed solidly on Cinderella's side. The ebony-skinned man stumbled to the side before righting himself. His muscles coiled as he jumped back to renew his attack on my mate. Enough! Alexander's voice boomed through the room and then froze in his movements. Alexander slowly, warily almost, relaxed his stance until he was back to that normal, arrogant form that made him look like a wolf in sheep's clothes. Cinderella did the same, relaxing slightly, and I could see now that he was definitely favoring his left leg, and he pressed a hand to his side. With the back of his hand, he angrily wiped at his mouth to get rid of the blood there. Alexander moved so fast that I didn't see him move. One moment he was halfway across the room, the next he was right next to the black man, reaching one hand out to press it against Cinderella's forehead. The black man jerked away as if burned, and a hissing sound escaped his throat. His spine stiffened, but then he lowered his head in submission. Alexander didn't move to put his hand back and resumed whatever it was he was doing before. Instead, he said, "My apologies. I forgot how much you dislike touch, my friend. Will you allow me this once?" Cinderella nodded like I knew he would. Somehow, Alexander had earned his trust, despite the man's obvious horrible past. I could see adoration and loyalty blazing in his near black eyes as he looked up to meet Alexander's eyes. My mate reached up again and carefully lay his hand against Cinderella's cheek, like a caress. I saw a shiver go over the black man's body, but he didn't step back again. After a few seconds, it was Alexander who did that. He turned his back to Cinderella and moved over to me in a predatory lope that made my mouth water. The way his muscles rippled as he moved made me wish I could pet and stroke him to my heart's content again. He stopped at my feet and offered me his hand to pull me to my feet. I accepted with a groan, but only because I wanted to scan his body to see if he had any injuries. I circled him once, allowing myself a moment to look at his scrumptious behind, but I came to the conclusion that he really wasn't hurt. "I bet you cheated and healed yourself so it looks like only Cinderella got hurt," I teased him. I knew he hadn't done that. Alexander might urge me to fight dirty, but he'd never do that himself. Not like this, at least. I heard a low musical laugh while Alexander sent me a playful glare. He knew I was teasing. "My lady, I'm flattered that you think so highly of my skills, but truly, No one ever manages to lay a blow on your mates. I smiled at Seriton. Are you okay? I felt somehow proud that Alexander was obviously so skilled in combat and a little chilled at the same time. Why did he have to be so skilled? I knew he'd once said something along the lines that he had to fight for his existence from the very first vampire breath he took. He gave me a gentle smile and then bowed. If you'd excuse me, my lord? Of course, could you send Jaden over? Alexander replied instantly, moving to wrap his arms around me from behind, pressing his front against my back. I leaned back, happy to surrender my weight to him so I could rest my still sore and painful limbs. Seriton didn't say anything as he left the room, but his stride was easy again, and it appeared his ribs no longer hurt either. Had Alexander healed him? Is that what he did when he touched the man's face? I could distinctly remember that he had to touch the place of the injury before, when he healed me. So I didn't think that was it. You know, I can't even heal myself. The gift only allows me to heal others. I could never cheat that way, Alexander explained, his mouth right next to my ear so that when he spoke, his lips brushed against the shell of my ear. Shivering, but frankly too tired and sore to feel aroused, I turned in his arms so I could rest my head against his bare chest comfortably. Why did you call for Jaden? Aren't we done training? He laughed but tugged me even closer. Because you wanted to learn to do that trick, remember? With the were? Besides, it's not even 11 o'clock yet. I gaped at him. Not even 11 yet? And I was already exhausted? Did I have no constitution whatsoever or something? I knew that wasn't entirely true. I was used to walking to and from school a lot, and I wasn't bad at PE. Tired like this, I wasn't sure if I'd even be able to repeat what I did yesterday to that were. I don't even know what I did, so I couldn't even begin to think how to repeat it. In fact, until Alexander said it was strange, I hadn't even realized I'd done something special. The door opened behind me and I felt Alexander stiffen the tiniest bit before he relaxed. Obviously, Jaden had just arrived. Alexander, Brittany dear, he said in that slightly husky low voice, one that reminded me of an animal. I felt Alexander nod in response, and I had to push at his arm so that I could turn around and smile at Jaden. He did so grudgingly. Hey Jaden. I lifted my arm to wave and then winced when it brought on a wave of pain. It was a struggle to fight gravity. Bloody hell. I was tired. Jaden laughed at the look on my face. You worked her real hard, didn't you? Poor thing. He sauntered over and then reached out his hand to mess up my hair, jerking my head away. I glared at him. Laughing again, he ran his knuckles over my cheek gently. So, what did you need me here for? I was kicking Bob's ass on Call of Duty, and I'd really like to get back to it. That's child's play. He sucks at that game, Alexander retorted with a smirk. I couldn't help it. I had to laugh at the absurdity of the situation. A shapeshifter panther and a powerful vampire, talking about a stupid video game as if they were two teenagers. How often did you see that? They both turned to look at me as if I lost my mind, and I shrugged. What? Right, Jaden drawled. You're here because we're going to do target practice, Jay, Alexander said, and he full-on grinned at the panther. I saw him frown. Let me guess, I'm the target. Looking back at my mate confirmed that. He looked like he was really going to enjoy himself. Who knew he liked it so much to make another suffer? Although, of course, I wasn't really going to hurt him, was I? You guessed right, Alexander replied, ushering me over to another panel in the wall that dropped out and slid to the side without either of us touching. I would have yelped in surprise, but I managed to keep it in because I knew it would make me look like an idiot. Behind the panel was another sort of storage space. It held all kinds of wicked knives and daggers. They were strapped against a black velvet board on the wall, and Alexander immediately reached for a small set of knives and handed them to me. They were small and thin, not even an inch wide and about as long as my hand. There were 3 of them, and as I held them, Alexander moved around me to strap a leather holster around my waist, a bit like a wide belt, but it had loops and slits in it to hold the knives. There. Right now you'll only need 1 knife, but I want you to get used to the holster and drawing the knives from them. As he talked, he took the knives one by one to slip them in place at the small of my back. When that was done, he took my right hand and guided it to holster so I could feel where the knives were and how they were situated. When he felt confident I knew how to find them, he told me to follow him back to Jaden. When I turned around, I realized he was no longer in human form. Instead, he was a huge panther staring at me warily with golden eyes. I couldn't blame him. Alexander had just handed me knives and declared him the target. The panther snorted, and then I heard a thought in my head. I can take whatever you dish out, girlie. Then he turned his massive head to look at my mate. It was obvious he was talking to him now. You're the only shifter I trust near her right now, Jay. That's why you're playing target. Don't tell me you're scared of a little pain. Those knives aren't big enough to hurt you in panther shape, and well, you know it. Besides, I checked on that wolf last night, and he was back to being human. A little worse for wear, but he told me he returned to normal in about 15 minutes. I could tell Jaden was still seriously uneasy about this. He didn't look forward to the possibility of being stuck in some kind of half shape, even if it was only for about 15 minutes. I was relieved to hear I hadn't permanently damaged anyone, though. I stepped closer to the big panther, and then reached out with empty hands to stroke his velvety soft fur. It was heavy and thick, luxurious to the touch. Don't worry, Jaden. I don't think I can do it again anyway. I don't even know what I did. Alexander was right next to me and ordered me to draw a knife. I did so hesitantly. Stab him here, McCoy, and try to replicate what you felt and did when you used the ballpoint on that wolf. The way he said it sounded easy as he moved my hands to hover the knife over one of Jaden's massive paws. It'll hurt him, but it won't inflict a lot of damage, and I can heal him right away. When I looked up at Alexander, he smiled gently. I promise you, Brittany, he won't be in pain for long. It's okay. Still, I didn't move. One hand still buried in Jaden's thick fur. His muscles had been tensed, but now they suddenly relaxed, and then I heard his voice in my head again. Seriously, Brittany, I can handle anything you dish out. I've had worse, and I'd gladly take worse to keep you safe. I was shocked by the strong feeling of loyalty he sent along with the thought. He was just as loyal as Seratin, and he cared very deeply about Alexander, and because of that, about me too, just like that. Why? I asked softly, needing to understand. Pack. Brittany, to me, Alexander is pack. You're his mate, so you are pack too. To a shifter, pack is everything. Pack means everything, and for pack, I would lay down my life gladly to keep them safe. A few pinpricks from that knife is worth it if it means you can beat off other shifters when they threaten you. I didn't know pack was that important to shifters, and I wondered what had happened that made Jaden include a vampire to his pack. Who else was pack to him? But that little speech did convince me to at least try, with two dominant males each trying to get me to do this, and the need inside myself to do something about this helplessness. Taking a few very deep breaths, I closed my eyes, trying to search my memory of the event I picked, through what I felt and did as well as I could, looking for that one abnormality, that thing that I'd felt or done differently that had enabled me to trap a shifter between shapes. When I thought I had it, I tried to bring forth that same feeling again. I stood like that for several minutes, trying to make sure I did it right on the first go. I wasn't sure I'd be able to muster the courage to stab poor Jaden a second time. There was the warmth of Alexander's hand on my left shoulder blade suddenly that helped ground me. His other hand he reached past me to place gently on Jaden's shoulder, to show me he was ready to heal him right away. Better get it over with. Raising my hand, I slammed the knife down, pouring the feeling I'd gathered in my body into that knife. The same feeling of despair and anger and determination as before. Jaden didn't even flinch. But he didn't start shifting shapes either. I pulled the knife back out, and Alexander had already healed it before I could even speak. It's okay, sweets. Hardly felt it. Try again. Jaden sent me warm thoughts to prove to me that he was completely fine with this, urging me on. Closing my eyes, I somehow found the strength to do it again. It was hours later when Alexander and Jaden decided I was done for the day. The knives I'd been using were all bloody, and so were my clothes. But neither had relented when I felt like running away screaming. How could they both be so easy and teasing when I was hurting someone for no reason every time I failed? And I had failed, miserably, time and again. Shamed about that, I didn't meet Jaden's eyes as we left the practice room to go to the kitchen for lunch. After about a dozen times, it had become apparent that stabbing Jaden when he was already in panther form didn't work. At least, I hadn't been able to make him lose control of his shape and make him fluctuate between the two. Jaden had then shifted to human form and surprised me by showing that he could do that and be clothed completely. Did that mean he kept his clothing on as he shifted? Yesterday, I clearly remembered Alexander ordering him to dress. I'd also seen the way the clothes the wolves had worn shredded on the ground, so I didn't think it worked that way. Alexander had incinerated every scrap of clothing in the blink of an eye, hiding the evidence from the rest of the school. Jaden in human form had been much harder for me to stab, even though he'd taunted me and prodded and teased. His obvious attempt to ease my mind and help me do it, he'd also bantered easily with Alexander. Stabbing him in human form didn't work either, and I desperately tried to convince the two males that I couldn't do it. That wolf must have been weak, and because of the pain he'd lost his own control, it had nothing to do with me. They didn't believe me, but Jaden had finally agreed that wolves and panthers were different, and that we had to check if this meant I could only catch wolves in between shapes. Alexander hadn't wanted to put that to the test, though. He wouldn't let me near any of the werewolves in this area, and he didn't have any wolves employed that he'd trust close to me either, nor were they loyal enough that he'd ask them to be stabbed for my training. Even now, they were discussing what to do to help me unlock this power they imagined I had, but really this morning of futility had proven I didn't have it. I wouldn't let myself get pushed into another grueling training session, where I had to hurt someone I hoped to be able to call friend. Jaden was someone I could easily like and feel comfortable around. He was easy in his affections, reaching out occasionally to just rub his knuckles over my cheek, just to show me he really wasn't blaming me for the pain he had to endure. It surprised me that Alexander didn't get territorial about this, but he seemed as easy around the panther as I felt. Affection was communicated between the two men differently, as with me, a rough pat on the shoulder and that banter between them. Instinctively, I realized that this was how pack functioned. Touch and affection seemed to be vital to the panther, as if it anchored him and steadied him. Perhaps being a shifter and containing both an animal and a human heart, this was more needed than with humans. The mix easily more volatile. We ate lunch, with Jaden scarfing down food as if his life depended on it. He wasn't exactly lacking table skills, but, as it were, I wouldn't take him to a 5-star restaurant either. Alexander laughed at my look and explained, "It's his panther nature. A gurmal shoyi, he can contain himself if he has to. But really, why would he when he's here?" Jaden just winked and then excused himself. Shifting from human to panther in the blink of an eye, he trotted out of the kitchen. I gaped after him, but no one else seemed to take much notice of the huge feline as he sprawled out on a couch and dozed off. At least I thought he'd gone to sleep. Not unexpected after the constant draw on his energy with all the healing Alexander had done. But Andy had followed Jaden with an interested gleam in his topaz eyes, and then followed the cat to the living. I wanted to call out and stop my little brother when he sidled up to couch Jaden was sprawled out on. Alexander stopped me with a hand on my shoulder and a smile on his face. "Do not worry, Andy is but a whelp in Jay's eyes, and he protects younglings with his life, whether he knows them or not. A child is sacred," Alexander explained in my mind. Sure enough, the big predator opened one lazy golden eye to blink slowly at my baby brother. Then he shifted his big body on the couch to create a space along the curve of his body to accommodate Andy, who didn't waste time and climbed up with the big cat immediately, curling his smaller body into the feline. Jaden lifted a heavy paw to wrap around his frame and tug him more securely onto the couch, and then resumed his apparent nap. Andy closed his eyes and was asleep with him in seconds. "Come a run." Alexander was a gentle breeze across my mind as he took my hand and tugged me with him up the stairs. Once in the safety of our room, I quickly pulled off the blood-stained shirt and threw it away. I wasn't going to wear that ever again. Shower? The single word hung in the air after he'd spoken it. For once, there was no sexual innuendo. He knew how exhausted I was. I nodded gratefully and made my way over to the closet, pulling out fresh, easy clothes. I wasn't planning on doing anything other than being lazy for the rest of the day. My muscles would protest if I tried to do something. When I entered the bathroom, Alexander was already there, but he wasn't starting the shower for me. Instead, he was running a bath. At my look, he smiled. "This might loosen those muscles. My apologies for working you so hard this morning. It was necessary." Necessary? He must have seen me frown because he got up and sauntered over to me in that confident, fluid stride of his. Necessary. One can only learn to tap the mental powers if one is too tired to rely on the physical. He took the bundle of clothes from my arms and placed them on the counter next to the sink, running warm and gentle fingers over my cheek with his other hands. "I shouldn't have worn you out so." "Not after yesterday." His stormy eyes were warm with concern as he slipped his hands to my waist to undo the leather holster. It fell to the floor with a thud, and my bra soon joined it. I was too tired anyway to protest to Alexander undressing me. It felt nice to rely on him like this, so when he pulled me closer to him, I immediately relinquished all my weight to him. He chuckled and ran his hands over my now bare back. "Can I trust you not to fall asleep in the water?" I wasn't so sure about that. My eyelids felt so heavy and gritty. Really, I shouldn't be this tired from the workout. It wasn't even that bad. Was it? What? Alexander gently prodded me. One of his hands had come around to undo the button on my pants. But there was nothing sexual about his touch now. I shivered as my jeans slid down my legs and pulled around my feet. The sudden cold air made my skin break out in goosebumps. Alexander picked me up and carried me to the edge of the bath, setting me down on it. No, I don't think I'll stay awake, to be honest. I don't get why I'm so tired, though. That workout was hard, but not that taxing. I should be sore only, but my head feels so heavy. My fist. I clenched in Alexander's shirt because if I let go, I knew I would fall over. "It means you are expending mental energy, gramokroi. It's proved that you have some unformed abilities. We just haven't found out yet how to channel them," he explained softly as he slipped the last clothing article off my body. I felt a little self-conscious about being completely naked in his presence, especially when he was still fully dressed. Nor were we in the throes of passion. That usually sufficed to make me forget about feeling embarrassed. He scooped me up easily and slid me slowly into the hot water and bubbles. It felt like heaven to my battered muscles, and I let out a long sigh. Alexander chuckled as he finally let go off me, reassured that I was safely leaning against the sloped side of the huge bathtub. My eyes had already closed themselves, no matter how hard I protested against it. A short moment later, I heard a splash, and then the water lapped up against my chest as movement disturbed it. Not a second later, I felt a set of strong arms pull me against a hard, muscular chest. A shocked squeak escaped my lips as my naked body came into contact with glorious naked male. Alexander chuckled in my ear. "I'm not going to let you drown, gramokroi. Relax." My cheeks infused with red and heat, but I couldn't deny how amazing it felt. Cradled between his legs, my backside pressed up against him and his arms wrapped around me. They held me up and encased me in warmth and safety. I was asleep maybe 2 minutes later. How I managed that with the both of us completely naked together for the first time, I really didn't understand. I was floating. The air around me was warm and glittered where sunlight hit fine motes of dust that swirled around me. The light was warm and golden, the way it was when the sun stood low on the horizon and hid the glass doors in the living just right. I spun around as I continued my dance. There was no music playing other than the music of the sunset as it played across the sky in an abundance of color. I loved this moment of the day. I loved the sunlight as it whispered across my skin. It felt like a lover's caress, or the embrace of a mother. At the thought of my mother, I shivered. She was a ray of sunshine around the house, just like always, but these past few days there had been hidden shadows in her eyes. The shadows tickled at my memory. I'd seen them before, but I couldn't remember when or why. It frustrated me to no end. Me? My baby brother's angelic voice interrupted my thoughts, and I swirled around to look at the tiny boy. At 5 years old, he looked like a cherub, the cutest boy ever. All my friends thought so too. "What is it, giant?" I asked him, wondering why he was out of bed. I scooped him off the floor and balanced him on my hip. He was wearing Spider-Man PJs and held his stuffed white lion tightly in his arms. Pushing out a trembling lip, he whispered, "The boogeyman was in my room." He turned his face to hide it in my shoulder, his small form shaking against me. "Come on, hey, we'll fight him and scare him away together," I said. It was what we always did when Andy thought the boogeyman plagued him. He squirmed till I put him down and ran to get the baseball bat my mom kept next to the door. It was too big for him still to hold properly, but he tried anyway. Taking an umbrella myself, I brandished it around like sword. "The boogeyman is no match for brave Knight Andy and his loyal sidekick," I proclaimed. He yelled fiercely in agreement, and we charged up the stairs together and straight to his room. The both of us immediately started jabbing at the shadows there, underneath the bed and the closet, behind the curtains, and even behind the door until Hay was sure the foul boogeyman was no more. With a smile, I tucked him into bed. "See, all is well, giant." "Sweet dreams," I whispered. As I left the room and made my way downstairs again, I noticed a deeper shadow next to the door, too dark with all the colors of the sunset, painting the white walls. A shiver ran down my spine as I stared at it, and it felt as if that shadow stared right back at me. I wanted to feel scared, but instead, a strange calm settled over me. I knew I was safe. That shadow could never hurt me. Stepping closer, I reached out a hand, feeling silly, but I still wanted to make sure there was nothing there but darkness. My hand touched something hard, searing my fingers as if I'd touched a blazing furnace. I jumped away. A hiss sounded in my ears, and then suddenly, the room was so much lighter, that shadow gone. Still, I felt like I wasn't alone, and I spun around to look if maybe Mom had gotten home early. In the doorway to the living room was a silhouette, the shape of a man. The light from the sunset made the contrast so intense that all I could see was his shape, distinctly male because of the wide expanse of chest and the confident male aura that oozed around him. I squinted my eyes to get a better look, and almost immediately, the shape started to fade away. Yet before he disappeared completely, I noticed the white trailing out of his back to the floor. Wings made of light? Wait. I called out, running forward because I felt like the strange visitor was good. Unlike the shadow from before, the one that had scared Andy. But as I reached the doorway, he was gone, leaving no trace behind. No, wait. There on the tile floor lay a single feather. The first thing that met my eyes when I opened them was the stark white of the bathtub and a layer of white bubbles. As I let my eyes drift upwards, I saw a few black folders and papers in it balanced on the side of the tub. Strong arms were still wrapped around me, and the moment I realized that, I also became aware of the muscular chest pressed against my back, male anatomy pressed against my rear, while thick male thighs cradled my legs. The position was incredibly intimate, but I didn't feel embarrassed. This felt right. This was exactly where I wanted to be, right here in Alexander's arms. The fact that his body was simply divine was just a very lucky side note. Although seeing the size of him, you couldn't exactly call it a side note. You awake again a grand mouchoir? Alexander said just at that moment, and then I did blush scarlet. God, I hope he didn't hear my thought there. There were still these moments when I projected them to him without meaning to. Yeah, and I feel much better, I replied. I felt really great. In fact, all the soreness in my muscles was gone, and that heavy feeling in my head had completely dissipated. I heard a noise, and then I saw that Alexander had deposited a Bluetooth earpiece on top of the folders. I did some work while you slept to keep me distracted, he explained with a soft chuckle. I have a lot of restraint, but not that much when it concerns you. With a gentle hand, he moved my hair aside and started lavishing hot kisses on my neck and throat. You are by far the most beautiful creature I've ever laid eyes on. A grand mouchoir. Under his administrations, I felt my body grow hot and tight with need, his own arousal evident in our current position. I moved to turn around and straddle him, wrapping my arms around his neck and pressing my chest against him. With a groan, he ran his hands down my back, pressing one against the small of my back but letting the other travel lower to cup my bottom. He attacked my mouth with a mind-blowing kiss that had me reeling with all the sensations coursing through me. I want to kiss every inch of your body, he whispered huskily in my ear. Before I could even respond to that sensual promise, he stood up and lifted me easily with him, stepping out of the, somehow, still deliciously warm water. He made short work of drying the both of us with soft towels, managing to make even that an erotic dance that served only to tighten the feminine muscles low in my body. The next I became aware of was my back colliding with the soft mattress in the bedroom, and Alexander looking down on me with an almost feral glint in his beautiful stormy eyes. They were now so dark they appeared black. I woke up when my stomach protested loudly. I was starving. As soon as I moved, Alexander tightened his arms around me for a short moment before releasing me. Let's get you fed, little human, he said. I laughed. Little human? Yes, my little human, he replied with a warm look in his eyes. They were the lightest shade of gray I'd seen on him so far. Was that because he was very sated right now? I thought we'd established that I was half demon and a quarter angel too. That means I'm hardly human, I said as I climbed out of bed and shrugged into a white shirt of Alexander, buttoning it slowly in the front as I looked around the room for something else to put on. Spotting Alexander's ripped jeans on the chair next to the closet, I hurried over and slipped them on with a pair of panties, bending down to roll up the pant legs and cinching a belt around my waist to hold them up. Dressed, I sighed happily. realizing that Alexander was watching me intently from where he stood, getting dressed himself in jeans and a tight dark gray shirt. I like it when you wear my clothes, agramokoi. Ignoring the comment besides smiling, I made my way over the wall panel that hid some of my things and pulled it aside to get the small box of knickknacks. Digging around in it, I soon found what I was looking for. "What are you doing, Britt?" Alexander asked curiously. He was kneeling behind me, surrounding me with his body heat. I closed the box and returned it to its place before carefully lifting the object I'd taken out of it. I dreamed about this in the bath. In my hands, I held a single feather. It was white, almost iridescent, and as long as my underarm, each filament tipped with gold. The feather of an angel. My grandfather's feather, if I interpreted my dream memories right. Alexander looked down on the object in my hands with a furrowed brow before he carefully lifted it from my hands, inspecting it with a practiced eye. "Do you know something I don't, Alexander?" I asked him when he still didn't say anything but got up and moved to hold it in front of a light. "Just look, Britt," he replied, as he moved the feather in front of the lamp it sparked. There wasn't really a good way to describe it, but the feather seemed to come alive and radiate light, or maybe it just reflected light in a very curious way. "Would you like to meet him?" he suddenly said, his voice quiet, almost solemn, as if he was lost in thought. Yet he turned those stormy eyes on me with a searching look, as if he wanted to reach inside my mind and see what it would do to me if I did.